Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're cracking open something really valuable. It's an actual interview transcript with a data analyst, Priya. And our mission for you is to pull out the key stuff. What makes a really effective data pro? We'll look at her journey, the tech skills, business sense, and how she keeps learning. Think of it like a shortcut to understanding the DNA of a successful analyst today.
Yeah, and what's great about using a transcript like this is, we get past the bullet points on a resume. We're looking beyond just what she did. We get insights into how she thought, how she tackled problems, learned from things. That's gold.
Okay, so let's unpack that journey. How does someone like Priya build up all this expertise? The transcript says she started out as a business analyst at SoftLogics, dealing with customer segmentation, using SQL and Excel mainly. Then she gradually moved into Power BI and later Python for things like churn modeling, campaign analytics.
hmm That's a pretty common path, actually, and a really effective one. Starting with that business context first, it gives you such a strong foundation. Her moving through the tools, SQL, Excel, then Power BI, Pythons, it feels like a natural progression, right?
Yeah.
Driven by needing to solve bigger, trickier business problems like figuring out churn or how well campaigns are working.
Right, so the need drove the skill development.
Exactly. And her current role at Digitech Retail, focusing on customer LTV and churn, that's a direct result of that evolution. She's applying everything she learned.
Okay, this is where it gets really interesting for me. The deep dive into that churn prediction model she built at Digitech. She used, what was it, logistic regression and random forests. And the goal was to pinpoint customers likely to leave so they could target them with win-back campaigns. Can you walk us through some of the technical side and, crucially, the impact?
Absolutely. So technically, it's a great example of applying data science properly. She started with about 2 years of raw transaction data, lots of cleaning and aggregation, using SQL first, standard, but essential. Then she engineered key features, things like recency, frequency, monetary value, often called RFM. How recent, how often, how much they spent.
Oh, RSM.
Yeah.
Got it.
Then the actual model building happened in Python. She evaluated it using AUC area under the curve. It's a solid metric for this kind of classification problem. It tells you how well the model separates the churners from the non-churners. And she didn't stop there. She included uplift modeling too.
Uplift modeling, what does that add?
Well, it goes beyond just predicting churn. It tries to predict the added impact of an intervention, like that win-back campaign. Which customers are actually likely to respond because of the campaign?
Oh, okay, so it's more targeted.
Exactly. More efficient.
Yeah.
And the result, pretty impressive. A 12% drop in churn over 3 months. That's significant.
Wow, yeah, 12% is substantial. But the transcript mentions she hit some roadblocks during the build, technical challenges.
Oh, definitely. Happens all the time in practice. 2 big ones she mentioned. First, label leakage. This is a classic trap.
Label leakage.
Yeah. It's when information that you wouldn't actually have at the time of prediction accidentally gets into your training data. Like maybe including whether someone clicked on the win-back offer when you're trying to predict who needs the offer in the first place. The model looks amazing in testing, but it's cheating.
Ah, I see. Like giving it the answers.
Pretty much. The other big one was balancing classes. With churn, usually only a small percentage of customers actually leave, maybe 10% in her case. If you just train a model on that raw data, it might learn to just predict no churn for everyone. It gets high accuracy overall, but it completely misses the customers you actually care about, the churners.
Right, so it's technically accurate but useless.
Exactly. So she had to use techniques like resampling and be really careful with cross-validation to make sure the model learned to identify that smaller group.
So dealing with those issues shows real practical smarts, not just knowing the algorithms.
Definitely. Critical thinking in action.
And if she were doing it again, what's the one thing she'd change?
She mentioned using SHP values earlier. SHAP, it stands for Shapley Additive Explanations.
Explainability tools.
Exactly. Tools to understand why the model makes a certain prediction. Like, why is this specific customer flagged as high risk? She found stakeholders loved that. They didn't just want accuracy numbers. They wanted to understand the why. Builds trust. Makes the insights actionable.
That makes total sense. Which brings us nicely to the business side of things. Technical skill is one piece, but communication is another. How would she present something complex like this churn model to, say, the head of marketing, someone who isn't deep in the tech weeds?
Yeah, crucial skill. She said she ditched the technical jargon completely. No talk of random forests or AUC. Instead, frame everything in business terms. Show how the model groups customers high, medium, low risk. And crucially, link that directly to potential revenue at risk if those high-risk customers leave. Make it out the bottom line.
Okay, focus on the outcome.
Right. And use visuals.
Mm-hmm.
Power BI dashboards showing segment sizes, how they change over time. Maybe even walk through a couple of anonymous customer journey examples to make it concrete.
Make it relatable.
Precisely.
Yeah.
It's all about translating the analytics into something the business can understand and act on.
Sounds like a solid strategy. But what about pushback? The transcript mentions she faced some skepticism, right? When the model's results maybe didn't align with people's gut
Oh
feelings.
yeah, that happens all the time. Data challenging intuition. Her approach wasn't to argue based on the model's stats. It was to prove it with results. She ran an A/B test. One group targeted using the model's recommendations, another using the traditional approach.
Let the data speak for itself.
Exactly. And the model-driven group performed 22% better.
Wow.
Yeah. That kind of concrete evidence is how you build trust in data-driven decision-making, especially when it's new or counterintuitive.
It's about demonstrating value. And speaking of learning, she also talked about a time things didn't go perfectly, a failure even. A Q4 sales forecast that was off by 15%.
Oh.
Overestimated.
hmm And the reason was interesting. She hadn't properly accounted for a one-off supply chain issue that had happened back in Q3.
An external factor the historical data didn't capture on its own.
Right. And this really highlights that blend needed between data and domain knowledge, her big learning. Always, always combine the data analysis with input from people who understand the business context deeply. Validate assumptions with stakeholders before locking in the model.
So models are powerful, but they don't operate in a vacuum. You need that human context.
You absolutely do. It's a partnership, really.
Okay, let's shift to staying current. This field moves so fast. How does Priya keep up? She mentions things like podcasts, Data Skeptic was one, and newsletters like Towards Data Science. Pretty standard stuff for folks in the field.
Yeah, staying plugged into the community is key.
But she also mentioned taking an internal workshop on LLMs, large language models, and experimenting with combining like regular tabular data with GPT-4 to create executive summaries. That sounds pretty advanced.
It really is. And it shows that commitment to continuous learning and, maybe more importantly, adaptability. You can't just rest on the skills you learned 5 years ago. You have to be constantly looking at new tools, new approaches. Her playing around with LLMs for summarizing complex data, that's a perfect example of exploring how new tech can actually solve existing business communication problems. Very forward-thinking.
And finally, the transcript mentions her being comfortable moving between industries. She went from retail to digital ads. And she seems excited about potentially working in finance or healthcare down the line, even client-facing roles. What does that tell you?
It speaks volumes about versatility, I think. True success in data isn't about being locked into one specific industry. It's about having that core problem-solving mindset and being able to apply it wherever data challenges exist. And the way her impact was described, it wasn't just about model accuracy. It was about stakeholder satisfaction, getting insights actually adopted, making work reusable, mentoring others, influencing project direction.
Right. It's a much broader definition of success.
Exactly. That's what makes a really high-impact data professional. It's not just coding or stats.